They got changed about a third of the way from my last class. So. Oh, it'll be good for this one. Break them out. Good morning. Glad to see some faces. We're now into the holiday stretch. So a lot of people leave and never come back.
I was reading, we were talking about the superlatives, and I found this map that shows where they all are. Highlighted.
Yeah.
It's really cool. And they even they cite Charles Murray, and they also cite the philosopher that I'm doing for my paper. It's a really long article, but it's super interesting, by the Washington Post. They consolidated all the data and made a giant map.
Yeah, those are. Murray uses data. He doesn't just invent stuff. He actually uses data. So I know that's annoying to liberals. There's stuff that's annoying to conservatives too. President Trump's conversation with Jerry Brown in Paradise.
Oh, yeah.
Was absolutely, that just goes to show that the two of them they're both masters at using language to represent a particular frame or way of looking at things.
It's obviously the wood's fault that it's on fire. Thought that was interesting. Blaming the fire on the
Well,
trees.
neither of them are wrong. They're both giving theories which, we've talked about this. Theories are neither true nor false. They're just better or worse. That is a puzzle for me.
Yeah.
Well, how can they be better or worse unless there's some kind of absolute value that you use to evaluate theory? And how can you do that if theories are neither true nor false? I suppose the whole problem is if we're in an era of belief that truth is a matter of voting, and the only things we're going to agree are true are things that we all agree on that are true. So if you have theories where you've got differences of opinion, by definition we're not going to be able to establish what's true. And yet at the same time, when you put theory into practice, my favorite line about that is that in theory there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is.
That's mine, yeah. So, then, I guess I'll be waiting to figure out if something's...
In theory, there's no difference between theory and practice.
Yeah.
But in practice, there is. Have you ever heard this music before?
Mm-hmm.
Does he look autistic? Not because anyone wearing glasses and having hair is necessarily autistic.
Is he?
I think he was. Shostakovich, Dmitry Dmitrovich,
I know what you're talking about, but I don't know. It's,
who wrote this movie.
yeah.
That's pretty impressive for someone who's autistic. Or I guess what end of the spectrum they're
Yeah,
on.
that's, yeah, he was social. He had 3 wives, not all at once. And one of the funniest words I've ever heard is,
Yeah, because I don't really think it matters. She just looking like she's just
oh, did I spell it right? I spelled it with an O. Why do I always do that? Uxorious.
It's from
Having
Is
or
that
showing
an
an
American?
excessive or submissive fondness for one's wife. That strikes me as like not really possible. How on earth did anyone ever invent this word?
Yeah.
That's like not right. Why would you? But on page 179 of a book about Shostakovich
Oh, I love
called
this.
The Noise of Time, they quote him, well, and it can't be right because he of course was speaking in Russian, but in English they say he's concerned that he's uxorious
I
for
wonder if
his
that
third
word
wife.
was made as a reaction to the Russian word and us not having a word for that.
I've yet to receive word from friends.
You should just keep this playing in the background for the entire lecture.
So you like Eric Satie?
Yeah.
I have to admit this, but I was going to play some more Shostakovich. The question, of course, is why? Why would I be playing Shostakovich? Our topic today is Hannah. And all my life, I've pronounced it Arendt. And lately, what I've come to realize is everyone that should know how to pronounce it pronounces it Arendt. So I guess I've been pronouncing it wrong all this time. Isn't that annoying? I don't know. Could be a fight, but I don't know. I guess you could. But I think I've mentioned her already because remember her married name is Blücher.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't I mention it?
Yeah.
Because the Mel Brooks movie makes fun of Frau Blücher every time it's uttered. The horses go. So I think there's a private joke there. Although, if you look it up, Mel Brooks actually denies it. So the question was actually presented to him. You know, is he making fun of Hannah Arendt? And despite his denial, I would actually argue that his denying it confirms it. Is that fair? I don't know. They say that it just popped up in the movie. It was ad-libbed. Usually just made that up, but that's
coincidental.
yeah, a bit coincidental. So why is she important? Well, we have a cute little article section from one of her essays. She wrote tons of essays, by the way, although most of them are hard to find because they're in journals that you'd have to go and find the original journal. Although they have been publishing some of them, select essays of hers. The latest book I've seen is the Thinking Without a Banister. Thinking Without a Banister. And
We talked about this, how all our
Did-
friends died. Yeah.
okay, oh my gosh, did we already do this class? Am I on schedule?
Maybe.
Let me double check.
That'd be funny.
Yeah,
Yeah, it says that it's November 19th.
it should be the 19th.
Is,
It's Hannah Arendt.
yeah, versus immortality, age 158, 160.
Okay. So, that's good music for this too, actually. So, what's the difference between immortality and eternity? Or eternal life? what are we promised if we're good Christians and we believe in God and we do our best to live a good life?
Eternal life.
Eternal life. You know. Immortality, on the other hand, is when you never die. And you're here. As Woody Allen says, when people ask, do you want to live forever in the hearts of your fans? I'd rather live forever in my apartment. Did I get that even right?
Yes. Did we have class on the 21st?
No.
Hey, we don't have a class on Wednesday.
I can show up though, because I was planning on it. But I was told absolutely
How's
yes.
this gonna go?
Was it Friday, I guess, that my schedule is wrong. That
I really hope we don't have class on
November
Friday, so
21st,
we
we do not. So I will postpone the November 21st lecture to our next meeting, which would be November 26th, which means if we just keep going that way, we'll end up having to combine things at the end. Which, by the way, have we talked about the final meeting, by the way? It's up to you if you want to come or not. It's not mandatory. None of my classes have been, really. But if anyone should come, I will be here. I have to be here for the... It's actually quite confusing, since we lose a whole day that I didn't expect. It seems to me like we're actually right on the border of our accreditation requirement. But I will be here. You don't have to come, of course. But I will bring a stack of movies, and whoever does come will get to vote on which movie we would like to watch and discuss. They're all philosophically oriented movies. One of them is The Circle.
What day is that?
That should be correct.
December
It should
12th?
be, oh, I don't have it. Part of what's kind of makes this confusing is normally our finals are the first week of December,
I know.
but this
Yeah.
semester they're the second.
That's so
You're
weird.
shipping me a break.
That's kind of weird.
Oh no,
But we don't
the
start
school
till,
I'm
like,
paying for,
this-
I have to go to.
I'm not
Okay, so if we
paying
turned in
for
our
this.
term paper and the third exam, hypothetically,
You're finished.
okay.
You go back to high school.
I mean, that, you know, if on the first day you did that, theoretically you'd be finished. but
That's what I heard, like, people just like.
Why would you
can-
not want to come to class?
Exactly.
Theoretically,
I just play on
you're paying to have the wonderful opportunity of listening to me muse about various things in person. I know it sounds.
We had the
absolutely-
videos though too, so.
Pardon?
We had the videos though, so it's
Yes.
like we're almost there.
Yes.
And then we could
Yeah.
virtual reality goggles. And
Well,
then
that wouldn't change the quality of the video, unfortunately.
we just make it
I
closer.
have, believe it or not, I have 360 kinds of cameras.
Really?
I gave some of them away because
That'd be
I
intense.
hardly ever
And you could,
use
like,
even
Yeah.
I've kept the best one.
next year that you can get a drone that like pans around the room.
I've thought about that, but you know, there would be a danger associated with my sitting in an office. And I don't have an office now. I used to have an
Really?
office down the hall, so I could just imagine, you know, having the drone just
Flying
head
around.
on down to the classroom and come in and, you know, I just,
Going to your car, grabbing your stuff, bringing it back up to your office.
it would, well, no, I wouldn't use it for that. But I could just imagine having the drone come in instead of me.
There you go. Oh, coming in to teach.
have-
It's
have
like an
the drone
iPad attached to the drone, and you're like
Basically
in your
being my
house.
loudsprecher.
Oh wow, I wonder if that's the future of drones teaching.
Probably.
Probably.
Because they could easily,
They'll just hit the drone and then classes.
plus I don't know how that would work if there were, you know, 5 or 6 drones in one. There'd be traffic jams, you know, it would look like everybody trying to drive out of paradise.
Well, they can have like the drone highways, like with like the first, like the top 3 feet of the hallways are like reserved for drones, with like lanes and like stoplights.
But if you have multiple drones, that could be a problem.
Well, they can abide to like the series of just
I want to
oh my
think
God.
that I want to go.
Hallways were not made for drones, so there's not enough
Well,
space.
adapt. Highways weren't made for
Windows.
cars originally. It's
Windows.
adapted.
Windows, yeah, the drone.
Drones can fly through the windows.
Oh.
That's good.
I'm glad I
The drones will be
And then
wearing
we'll
robes at
discover that ravens
graduation.
don't like them. I've heard birds literally attack drones.
Really?
Like,
I'm undergraduate.
so I don't know.
That's it.
So keep in mind,
Doctorate of nursing.
if you want to come, by the way, you could bring food. It could be a party, that last session. Just don't make the room a mess, plus no banned beverages, you know, or
Right.
that kind of thing. And yes, make sure you email me everything, because I will base your grade on the actual number of words I've received from you.
Wait, can you repeat
Looking
that
for
one more
Doctor
time?
Clark.
Make sure you send everything.
Can you repeat that one more time?
So do send me everything, because I will base your grade on the actual number of words you sent me
For the test?
for the tests and the term paper. And quizzes, although the quizzes, remember I weigh those differently. I just take them, download them all onto my flash drive and sit it on a scale and see.
Are those based on words?
No,
Can you just
that's
use a
on
really
volume.
heavy flash drive?
They're based on what?
It's supposed to be funny. Well, it is funny. You ever weighed a flash drive? No matter what you upload on a flash drive, it should not change its weight.
It actually does,
It does?
really slightly.
Really?
I think you have to have a really fancy
get-
scale to pick that up.
You get like a terabyte and you fill it all the way, it weighs like a gram more.
That's crazy.
I don't know
But
how.
it's just a rearrangement of
I
bits.
can't believe you.
That's what I read in a book somewhere.
That's
So probably it's fake news, yes.
Sorry, so, at the end, you want us to like resubmit all of them?
Try that with like a
No. Just so long, yeah, if you've received my replies to the earlier ones, of course, we're good. If you haven't, if for some reason you emailed me test 1, test 2, and I haven't replied, well, it could be that you, for some reason, not getting my replies, but it could also mean that I haven't gotten them. And that's important, because as you notice, I haven't really memorized anybody's names. And so when it gets right down to it, I'll be trying to figure out, who is this person?
I just found something that says the internet should weigh around 50 grams based on some rough calculations.
The internet itself?
Yeah,
How many credits are you taking this semester?
150 grams?
50.
It seems like a
There's a
lot.
whole video about it on YouTube.
Of course, we have the, what is it, the kilogram has been updated. So that's kind of interesting. Okay, so, yeah, so that's just class business. Please make sure you have everything in. If it turns out I don't have everything, I will try to email you at least, before I turn in grades. But the bureaucracy makes it really, really difficult to
Switch straight to college.
to change a grade, because they don't like doing all that. So I mean, if I turn in the wrong grade and then you email and say, well, I did send you everything, how come you gave me a B or whatever? And I find it, then I'm like, oh crap, and I'm gonna have to like low crawl on my hands and knees in the mud, up to the dean. Please, it was all my fault. Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa, etc. Which will work because he speaks Latin.
I don't.
That's kind of fine. Okay. Yeah, so I want to make sure that's right. But also, I want to have the maximum impact on your poor brain before we're finished. So please do come and let's discuss the last couple of things. Greece and Rome, the debate between Mary Beard and Boris Johnson is absolutely excellent. So I highly recommend watching that before we talk about John Dewey, although that will be delayed to the 28th, obviously. But please do watch that. And you can even vote. That will be the quiz question that day, is who do you think had more of an impact on our society, the Greeks or the Romans, which is actually kind of hilarious. It's tongue-in-cheek as a question, but nonetheless kind of interesting. Okay. But so Hannah Arendt, if we're looking at her article, that's kind of interesting that she reminds us there is a difference between immortality and eternity. Eternity actually includes now, of course, so this is all part of eternity. And when we think about God, we don't think of God in the Christian sense as prior to the creation, created everything, and then just sat someplace and let things go. Instead, we contemplate the concept of God as entailing a constant interaction with us, so that now is part of eternity, and God is eternal. So not just the future or the past, especially not just the past, etc. But today, we're with our medical care and everything else, we're looking at living forever as a goal. And there's anybody ever heard of Dr. Seed? I know that could be even hilarious considering. Mentions Dr. Seed, but when they were contemplating genetic modification of human DNA in the United States, this was during George Bush's presidency, George W. Bush. The Congress took long enough arguing over it that scientists ended up telling them, oh, by the way, forget that argument, we don't do that anymore. So that was over the stem cells that were taken from fetal tissue, and they had a set of lines of fetal tissue that had already been harvested and spread out through the various scientific labs that were using those to experiment, when there was a hue and cry from conservatives that this basically entailed using fetuses. So number one, they had to be aborted, right? So aborted fetuses being used for experiments, basically. And that sounded absolutely horrendous to those who value human life, because it means that we basically are taking unborn children and using them for scientific experiments, and that sounded like a bad scientific dream, right? But by the time the senators basically started mulling that over and trying to figure out what that all meant, because basically most of them weren't biologists, of course, the scientists turned around and said, oh, never mind, we don't need fetal tissue anymore. We've discovered that we could get stem cells from you. In fact, that would be even better, because if we use your stem cells, then we don't have to fight them if we install them back into you, because they're yours. So there will be no conflict between your biochemistry and theirs, which could be combated with drugs that keep your immune system from fighting them. The trouble, of course, is if they're doing that, then your immune system is weakened and you could die from other things.
How do they harvest like stem cells on adults? Like, how do they?
I believe they could get them from just any place now. Let me double check though. I don't know. This is the kind of stuff that
Wait.
Medical News Today. How old was the article? discovery. Two main sources, adult body tissues and embryos. That doesn't seem right. That might be just where we actually harvest them from. I know when I was not too long ago, I was told that, your brain, you have a limited number of cells that are there when you're basically a child. And once you hit like around 21, they start to die off, and that's no help, and they won't be replaced. That's totally wrong. Now we know that your brain is replacing your neurons constantly, and that there are stem cells. It absolutely sounds amazing because they leave from the pineal gland and head off into space, and your brain is about the same size as the universe. So imagine sending off a spaceship off into space, and when a particular brain cell dies, which there's kind of like scheduled to do every 2 years or so, that as that brain cell dies, the stem cell arrives and is already designed to replace that particular brain cell. And that's like, there's no highway or anything, they just head off into the, so that sounds like magic, which, by the way, I guess anything we can't explain sounds like magic until we can explain it, etc. Right? I screwed that quote up, but you've heard it before, I'm sure. So apparently there are 4 types of brain cells, and even though the stem cell is like not specific which one it will be, by the time it gets to the specific cell that needs to be replaced, it arrives and switches, and it's already one of those particular types of neurons. So that's absolutely amazing, I suppose. How it maintains the memory, though, that's pretty interesting, because we don't know. Half the neuroscientists argue that memory is a result of the network itself and the relationships between the neurons. Maybe not quite half of the others argue that the memories are perhaps partially a result of the network, but they're also inside the specific neurons, inside the myelin sheath. There's a set of small particles that literally house the memories. So that's kind of weird. That's my favorite argument, though, is the side that says that it's inside. So it's a quantum process that enables our memories, and that would explain also why we're quantum computers instead of Turing-type computers. You heard that argument, and that therefore our memories are non-local, so that when we think we're going through time and space, we retrieve our memories.
There's 2 like genetic types of cells, and those are neurons and glial cells, and then there's like 14 types of neurons, and then
There's more. I'm not keeping up.
4 or
obviously.
5 types of glial cells.
So that's I don't know how to keep up with all of the new developments. I'm sure there are more things being learned today than I'll ever find out. It's kind of wonderful and annoying at the same time. If you feel like your job is knowing everything, it's very frustrating, especially on Mondays, because so much happens over the weekend if you weren't keeping up. Okay, in any case, science is proceeding at an amazing rate. There's not only these kinds of discoveries that we're doing that make it seem like we might be able to have some Methuselahs among us eventually, right? It used to be just a metaphor, but wow, that's interesting. But then the other and the thing with Dr. Seed, by the way, is when the United States says that they were going to make laws to prevent doctors from doing those kinds of experiments, and all the doctors were arguing, well, that just means that it would be the doctors overseas that would do all those things and have all those great inventions and copyrights and all that sort of thing, new medicines, etc. Dr. Seed was one American that went to Japan to build his lab to try to make sure that he would at least live forever. So that's kind of interesting. Yes?
Have you heard of Ray Kurzweil?
Yes. Yes, but remind me, why he's a scientist, right?
Yeah, he's an inventor. He's trying to extend his life so he can live far enough that he can make a complete perfect recreation of his father so he can speak to him again after 40 years.
There's also, apart from medical science, there's also the attempt to download our thoughts into an AI. I think I already showed you a couple of models of that, right? The one woman that basically the Japanese have a copy of her head that then basically is learning how to be her, so that eventually when she dies, she'll still be around in that model. I did try to join the website for that, and it rejected my uploaded photograph of myself, which was like one of the first steps, because you have to build your avatar, because your avatar then is what is going to basically be the online voice for yourself, right? So you have to create your avatar to go any further before you could upload specific information about yourself. And I tried like 5 or 6 different photos of myself, and it rejected all of them. None of them were exactly what they were looking for. So I'll have to work on that again. I think I have to like pose against a black background or something, so that's just the outline of my face. I think the beard is what's throwing it, but I'm not sure. Because it wants, a real good shape of your face. What else? So I don't think that's confusing at all. But that's, I think, the point. Did anyone have any other thoughts about her article? Yes, no, maybe so. In general, though, if we're talking about Hannah Arendt, what's the most famous, anybody know? What's the most famous thing that everyone knows about Hannah Arendt? You can actually come up with a couple things, I think. It's her famous byline for Eichmann in Jerusalem. Anybody? You ever heard of Hannah Arendt before? No? Not a...
Did she coin the phrase "the human condition," or did she just?
That's the title of one of her books.
Yeah, was she the one to like come up with that, or was that?
No. Of course, her book was that one was in German, I think, initially, so that would have been a translation of it. But it seems to me when I think of that, I think of it in French for some reason. So I think some French author has written a previous version or used it. Sartre, probably. Jean-Paul Sartre was also a student of Heidegger and Husserl. Actually, between Heidegger and Sartre was kind of a conflict. The book that Sartre wrote, Being and Nothingness, was a response to Heidegger's Being and Time. I think I might have mentioned that already. But the most important line that I remember always hearing is the banality of evil.
Oh yeah, we talked about that.
We mentioned that?
Mm-hmm.
The banality of evil. That's the subtitle of this book. Eichmann in Jerusalem, a report on the banality of evil. And a lot of the questions then concerned, well, what exactly did she mean by evil being banal, or the banality of evil? And there are lots of different opinions on it. She even offers opinions in one of her interviews. She was interviewed by Joachim C. Fest. I don't know if it would be on the internet. Let me see.
Frau Arendt, vor etwa einem Jahr ist in den Vereinigten Staaten Ihr Buch Eichmann in Jerusalem erschienen, nachdem es zuvor von der Zeitschrift der New Yorker veröffentlicht worden ist. Glauben Sie, dass irgendein Zusammenhang besteht zwischen dem Eichmann-Prozess?
Die Geschichte ist sozusagen dumm. Der Mann sieht nicht, dass das Menschen tun, die ihm taumeln.
So that doesn't help. But in any case, in this interview, he asked her what she meant by it, and she gave 3 different explanations for it, each one more emphatic than the previous. So it was like the one was an explanation of it, the second was kind of an explanation of that explanation, and the third was kind of an emphatic explanation of both of them. I should have brought a copy of it, and we could have read it. I could have read it out loud. Because it's not exactly what I had thought. But when you get right down to it, the main thing is she was at the trial with Eichmann, and Eichmann was guilty. Everyone knew ahead of time. He had escaped after the collapse of the Third Reich, had made it to Argentina, but the Israelis found him, brought him back to Israel for trial, put him on trial. He was the Nazi who literally ran the Holocaust. You can imagine everyone wanted him to be absolutely evil. And as actually, she was a German. She was German originally, Jewish also, by the way, which, by the way, adds some interesting aspects to her relationship with Martin Heidegger. Remember, Martin Heidegger became the head academic for a while, at least at the University of Marburg in Germany. Was a Nazi, and even in speeches said, let the academics be the third arm of the Reich, the first arm being the army, the second arm being the Air Force, and the third arm being the academics. It's hard to imagine a bunch of PhDs out there with weapons. This is not really, I'm sure that's not what he meant, of course. But so one of the things he did as the head academic during the Reich was fired all the Jewish professors, which, you know, that was one of the main reasons he ended up restricted while after the war. He was restricted for a while. Once he served out his term, basically, that he returned to teaching again and writing. And by the way, Hannah Arendt was the one who was selected to give the speech on his 80th birthday, which is an essay you can read. Martin Heidegger at 80 was the title of her paper. But she was his lover as a graduate student, and even later, I don't know if I mentioned that the only thing that Mrs. Heidegger didn't like about her was that she smoked too much. So whenever she was over, she would smoke constantly. So that's kind of amazing. I don't know, but if you think, well, the relationship that they had, the way they thought about marriage, I guess, was quite different at the time. But her view of Eichmann, watching him at the trial, where she was an American reporter, because she had become an American citizen, I think in 1955, something like that. And remember, she married Mr. Blücher, Dr. Blücher, who was also a German emigre. And they both taught at Bard College. You ever heard of Bard College? Yes? Some yes? Bard College. So one part of Bard College, it's in New York, New York State, but north of New York City, so it's more in the woods. Nice place, I guess. Only college I know of that actually has a cemetery for its faculty. It does. It has. Her grave is actually in a cemetery, right there, kind of in the college square, right next to her husband, who was also a teacher there. So that's kind of weird. You can stop by and pay your respects to the previous faculty. That's weird. Yes? No? Maybe so. In any case, Bard College has the Hannah Arendt what's it called? There's a search. So the Hannah Arendt Center is part of Bard College. Okay, but so her description of Eichmann as she listened through the trial was that he was just like any other human being, just like any of us. There was nothing especially evil about him. And by the way, this is applied not just to him, but it's understood to be associated then with an interpretation of the Nazi functionaries in general, right? They're just like us. And that's not what communities, or especially the Jewish community in the United States, expected to hear about him. They expected to hear that these people were just evil incarnate, right? Not that they are just normal human beings who just happened to be doing a job that was killing all of the European Jewry, right? You know, that's just not what they wanted to hear. And for her to say that and just say, well, he was exceptionally good at that. He was really good at numbers, really good at getting the timing right so that large groups of people could be loaded on trains and, you know, shipped to places where they were people would make decisions about who should be saved, who should be worked to death, who should be killed immediately, all of that sort of, and supplying the train, supplying everything so that it ran like clockwork and everything was efficient. He was really, really good at doing that. And so, you know, the feeling was that this is the guy that ran the Holocaust for Hitler. You know, he ought to be thought of as evil, but he really was just trying to do a very good job and hopefully get promoted. In fact, there's some argument that he wasn't really even thought very highly of by the SS, by the leadership, and you know, he was kind of thought of as kind of a peon among the leadership, and he apparently wanted to be thought of highly by them, so he was doing his best in order to be, you know, part of the leadership, and never quite made it. So basically he's just doing his job, and so evil happens in the world not because there are evil people, argument would be that Hitler essentially thought what he was doing was for the best. But his opinion is different than those that disagree. So there you have that conflict over morality. How can you determine what is a moral fact? It doesn't seem like you can. We're at the point, thanks to David Hume, if we go back far enough, that morality is essentially kind of a interpretation, if anything. That we could have different points of view. So one person could think that people should be wiped out because we don't like them, and other people would argue that those very same people deserve our respect because they're people too. We might have the same exact argument here in town. In fact, I think we do, actually. If you update it to our situation, we have homeless folks downtown, and we have people that want them out of town one way or the other. They don't care how, they just don't want to drive downtown and see a whole crowd of people sitting around with cardboard signs on every main corner, right, begging for money, especially if all they think that they're using the money for, and it might be true, is buying alcohol, so that they're totally incapable of doing anything with their lives. And we should, clean them up, get them out of town. Other folks feel like, no, it's more important for us to spend the money on flowers downtown and not spend any money on getting rid of all these folks. Right? Yes, that was in the paper just this morning. What do you think of the flowers downtown? The flowers that decorate downtown all the time?
Are we spending more? Did it say that we were spending more money on flowers than we were on homeless people?
Bridge, Daily News. So let's fire all the gardeners. Close the greenhouses. Have you ever been to the municipal greenhouse? Oh my goodness, you have to visit, especially if they're thinking of closing it. Go visit before they do. Because it's the only place in town where in November, with this kind of weather, you can actually feel like you're in a Southwest desert or Hawaii. The two rooms are, the one is a tropical rainforest and the other one is an arid desert. And so you can see all sorts of cacti. There are also some birds. There are koi fish in a fish pond in the room that's like Hawaii. There's banana trees in there. Although, of course, you have to be there. Remember, the banana trees grow completely in 1 year, have their bananas, and then the tree dies, and it starts again right afterwards. So you have to time your visit if you want to see bananas growing in Anchorage. But that's kind of cool to go in there. You could go. You could get married in there, by the way. They have weddings. Have been occasions when I visited and discovered that there's a homeless guy sitting in the bathroom outside. That's where he slept over the night. Which is kind of gross. But what are you going to do? So that's cool. Visit those. Do you know where they are? Yes? No?
The flowers?
The municipal greenhouses. If you drive down DeBar, do you know where the old headquarters building for the Anchorage School District used to be? The gray building. It's now a mall of some sort. Also, if you go down DeBar and you pass Boniface, the very next left turn you could make takes you to like the municipal golf course, and there's a trail system there, Russian Jack. So there's a trail, there's a golf course, which is, by the way, absolutely terrible. the greens are made out of concrete with like astroturf on them. So if you hit your ball and it lands on the green, it bounces right off because it's just hit like concrete. So not a good place. So always chip up to the green and then putt onto the green. Don't just, if you ever do that. Ever played golf? Anybody want to play golf? Yes.
With my dad, yeah.
Yes. But as you go up that road to the golf course, immediately on the right, there's a little parking area. Be careful though, because there's no fence or anything, and if you park too far, you go down into the, off the cliff, so don't do that. But so park there and you just walk into the greenhouse. The second door is the public door. You can go in and you can, it's free, it's open from 10 to 3 o'clock, I think, every day. And so you can go in and have lunch. You bring a sandwich, you can sit on the bench. It is free. You can just go in and enjoy sitting in a tropical climate. If you're sitting in there with a book, by the way, be careful, because sometimes when the spritzel comes on, it dribbles and your book might get wet. It's nice. So you can go into there. It's the municipal greenhouse. But if they close that, that would be mean and rotten. I used to take classes, meet classes in there when I did Truth, Beauty, Goodness, because we would meet in there. I would have 3 outings for the class. One would be at Beluga Point, one would be at the greenhouse, and one would be in the museum. Truth, Beauty, and Goodness. Pardon?
Can we meet in the greenhouse?
It's hard to arrange because you'd have to have transportation for everyone. But yes, we could actually do that if you all wanted to, but probably not during class time. We could meet like afterwards. Well, it would have to be before 3 o'clock. When do they close? It's the Man, M-A-N-N, Bridge. That's obviously a summer picture. But yes, all the flowers and plants are in there year-round, so they're year-round. It's a year-round environment. One of the things the article says is that if they shut the heat off, that place will collapse. It's too old. It was donated by Lydia Selcraig many years ago. So. But it's right above that greenhouse where they have rows of greenhouses where they grow all the plants that they use to decorate Anchorage every year. So, and they bring them back in. So if they spend like 4 or 5 years not having them, it's not like it would be easy to all of a sudden bring them back. And they're thinking of firing all 5 of the full-time gardeners. So another aspect of at least today's class was Roger Scruton.
This little thumb drive has an entire operating system on it, meaning it's going to run your whole computer.
So Roger Scruton is a British philosopher. He's basically retired now. He lives on his ranch. I guess in England you don't call it a ranch, you call it a farm. He has at least one horse. And in this video, what it's an interview. This is actually part 2 of the interview he has with a Dutch interview person. So that's why we've got.
They're here every time. They come to talk to each other and to renew their social attachments and also their attachment to the place. The problem with the modern world, in my view, is that people no longer dwell on the earth. They move nomadically around it in search of something they know not what, never finding it, moving from person to person, place to place.
Interneting.
Yeah, interneting.
Metaphor.
Yes, exactly.
So, Quid's question for today is, how do you maintain your attachment to the earth despite modern times, despite the way our modern society is? How do you maintain your attachment to the earth, to our primal nature, I guess, would be another way of talking about it. For him, he's talking about, of course, being on a farm, living on a farm, taking care of the farm, taking care of horses, and as he does in this particular occasion.
Whereas these people still dwell, as Heidegger would say, wohnen in the land. And that is something which, I'm not a great fan of Heidegger, but I saw the few things that he said is absolutely true, that only if we learn how to dwell can we build, and only if we build can we actually live with each other. And that's the secret of real architecture. That's why Amsterdam is beautiful. It's still a place of dwelling. It was built as a place of dwelling. But of course, modern architecture is hideous, largely because it's an architecture for nomads who sweep through it like a wind, like pieces of paper on a wind, and then disappear. So that, if you're to understand beauty, you have to understand experiences like this attempt to reaffirm your connection with a particular place and a particular time and a particular social web.
That's a kind of Marxist approach also in what you're saying.
Not everything that Marx says
the
is
autocratic way of life, the common people.
Yeah.
Being the civilization of beauty and consolation.
Consolation means that
the day of this.
You Dutch are always afraid of things. That's the trouble. Every serious idea is dangerous. But, when in a civilized mind, it is not. It's an instrument of peace. I'm talking about peaceful existence in a single place, an unthreatening form of being. And, maybe there's something true in Marx. What is true in Marx is what comes to him from Hegel. That in all of us, there's this desire for homecoming, Heimkehr, about which Hölderlin wrote so beautifully. And that is where consolation resides, where we find ourselves having ventured out into all these dangerous experiments of individual living, at last coming back and swallowing all our pride and humbly acquiescing in a social order which is bigger than ourselves. And that's what this is all about to me.
But when we were listening to this piece, this is melodic, this is nice. I don't know, do you like it? There's some others that he did that are also nice.
gifts.
So have you ever heard this one? The violin comes in now. So, just so you, if you've not heard of Shostakovich, Dmitri Shostakovich was a brilliant musician. He was a little boy when Lenin returned to Leningrad, what became Leningrad. He remembered, Shostakovich remembered being as a little boy, being in the crowd that were greeting Lenin when he returned. But he went on to music school. He was found to be brilliant, so he kept getting promoted even as a young man. He was writing his first symphony, and then he was hired by the communist state to write music for various occasions of celebration for the Soviet Union. In fact, when I think it was 1937 or around then, when the Russians invaded Finland, they hired him ahead of time to write music for the celebratory march of the Red Army into Finland, which he wrote. I guess what, the Red Army didn't have a celebratory march into Finland because it didn't go very well. But, so he was writing for the communists, but wrote an opera, and the opera he wrote, well, he actually wrote several operas, but so he wrote an opera which originally was named Lady Macbeth. She's married to an ogreish husband, so she poisons him. And of course, as he dies, then she gets to leave with her boyfriend. Well, Stalin, however you want to say it, Joseph, right, attended a performance of the opera. After it had already been popular for like about 2 years or so, he finally came and attended it, and he absolutely hated it, left before it was even over. And then Pravda, which was the newspaper, by the way, the title Pravda means truth, and they had two newspapers, main newspapers. One was Pravda, the other one was Izvestia, which means news. And the joke was, Pravdy совсем нет известий, и в известии совсем нет правды. Right? So, in truth, there is no news, and in news, there is no truth. Get the interesting Soviet joke, right? Soviet era joke, right? Totally wrong for you to say that. Actually, if the Soviets knew you were saying it, it had to be a joke under the table, not one that would get you in trouble with the leadership. Right? So Shostakovich thought at any minute he was going to have the door knocked on, and he was going to go off and never return again because Stalin hated his opera. And in fact, for like months, every night, he stood there with his suitcase packed, waiting for them to come to get him at the top of the elevator of his building on his floor because he didn't want them disturbing and perhaps taking his whole family. And they never came because he didn't realize it, but even though Stalin hated that opera, he didn't hate him. Instead, the communists basically just told him, okay, no more of this formalist music, just write music that has popular tunes, right? And so he ended up, as penance, writing music for TV shows, Russian films, and so on. The Gadfly was one of the Russian films, so that, notice that violin piece, very, very popular music. The waltz, very, very beautiful. But as a matter of fact, Shostakovich hated all of that, although I would think that, and in fact I know that Roger Scruton would completely agree with that kind of music, because that brings us into, attachment to the earth. We like that. That's beautiful music. Instead, you build music like the buildings that are there just for the paper to blow through, as he was criticizing, if you heard that, you end up getting something like this.
This Wednesday,
Break the internet.
rated PG, everywhere Wednesday.
See if you could find a melody in there that you can even remember. Similar to the opera, actually. No melodies that you could actually... Sounds like noise. But this was the kind of stuff that he thought would eventually make him the Red Beethoven. There was, they all wanted someone to become the next great composer that would match Beethoven. And of course, since it was a communist state, it was red. That composer would be the Red Beethoven. He wanted to be the Red Beethoven, and this was the kind of stuff he was writing. But Stalin absolutely hated it. By the way, as a kid, I hated this stuff too. I thought it was absolutely horrible. Do you hate it too? No? Maybe they were playing it.
Maybe, no.
Now, picture this being played by an orchestra that was terrible.
Yeah. I'm very
And I think that's what happened to Stalin, was that he's, the performance was also bad. But
Well, more has been written and debated about this next work than almost any other 20th century piece of music. Shostakovich wrote this Fifth Symphony in 1937 at the height of Stalin's purges. It was a time of arrests in the middle of the night, of
so this was the symphony that he wrote that retrieved himself.
Life, not just his career, was on a knife edge after his previous work, the opera Lady Macbeth of Mtsensk, had been considered too modern, too complex to be properly communist. Members of his family disappeared. His mentor in the party was shot. And he had to play safe and retain artistic credibility. Well, it would be nearly 2 years before he presented a new major work, and when he did, it was with a note of contrition. The symphony was accompanied by an article entitled "A Soviet Artist's Creative Response to Just Criticism."
Proletariat, or basically the
Shostakovich
common
had a hand in
folk.
writing these words, or simply allowed them to be
How
published
similar
under
is
his
that
name,
to having
is
a
unknown.
populist form of
Well,
government?
the Fifth Symphony was a critical, political, and public success. The music is unsettling, it's sensitive, it's conflicted. There are nods to Russian Orthodox
communism,
requiems, there are nods to
people
other
at the
great
very
Russian
top,
composers,
so it's
and
not
therefore
like
it is
the
open to any
common
number of
people are
interpretations.
Like
Should the
Trump.
symphony be taken
Like
as
Trump.
a
Like
loyal Soviet
democracy,
artist?
yeah.
Like,
Or is there
every single
subversion
person
in the
he
music?
appointed was a millionaire
That's fair.
friend.
And here is Philippe Jobin to conduct the Gustav Mahler Youth Orchestra in Shostakovich's Fifth Symphony.
This is the work that he wrote to get himself a reprieve. So we're going to hear lots of melody. Well, we won't hear the whole thing, of course, but if you get the chance, notice it's free. It's on the internet. I don't know why people buy music anymore. You can pick anything you like, and it will be there. Keep in mind that his lifetime and Hannah Arendt's are simultaneous. While she's writing philosophy, Shostakovich died on August 9th, 1975. And she died December 1975, so just a few months after he did. So don't come on Wednesday. As far as I understand, the building will be open. No classes. Sorry. That was actually published, so I missed that when I did my syllabus. Sorry about that. It does seem to me that that makes us one class short, so I don't know how that works out.
Another movie night. That'd be
Yeah.
fun.
Well, that actually is included. So. The last session is a double session.
Well, the thing is that like all the classes that are happening on Wednesday are ahead of the
Right. So that actually matches. I just missed it myself. How are you doing on your term papers and stuff? You need a group that you want to join together with, having other people read it?
Nah,
I
we're
think that's a terrible idea.
That's a fun
That's called satire. Irony. Sarcasm. President Trump, while standing in paradise with Jerry Brown, referred to paradise as pleasure. He got the name wrong, and Jerry Brown had to correct it.
He called it Pleasures Town. That's really unfortunate. That's like one of the worst mistakes you can make.
Well, I couldn't have looked very much like paradise either at the time he was there.
That's fair. He should have made that argument. But like it also didn't look like pleasure. Unless maybe Trump's into forest fire.
If you've driven around California, a lot of the places that were just looked like Dante's Inferno.
Firefighter, just a bunch of dudes. Dudes just rakes. Just rake the forests. And I was like, no.
Have a good holiday. Be safe. Don't drive your pickup into a ditch.
Yeah, he's like, maybe you should read.
I don't think Turkey really
I
has
hope
tryptophan.
GCI doesn't pay you or charge you extra. I saw on your blog that they were trying.
They were. They were. I don't know how I overused my account, but apparently I did. Could be listening to this kind of stuff.
What was the first question?
You mean today?
Yeah.
How do you keep in touch with the earth? How do you?
Yeah, that's right.
I don't think I do. I mean, my dog helps.
Yeah.
So like when I go out for a walk with the dog, I'm out in nature, and I'm often on the ground. She's a big dog, and she's not very well behaved. At least not yet. Especially in weather like this, it becomes a luge event. Pulled along like a sled. But most of the time I spend reading in the house, on the internet, reading books, email, thinking about abstract questions and stuff. And in fact, you could live in American cities without ever coming in contact with nature. You can see doves or pigeons sitting, roosting on your windowsill. But if you're thinking about the kind of nature that at least you can see in the greenhouse, if you go visit there, or you can see, I mean, if you go down in downtown Anchorage, even in the summer, those flowers are part of what makes the city gorgeous, right?
Yeah.
And if they take that funding away, I understand that. The issue is, of course, we have not enough money for everything we want to do, and rather than raising more money, which would be, of course, the one alternative, which at the moment is totally unpopular politically. That means we have to do less, which means they have to make decisions what to cut, right? And apparently one of the decisions they think might, I think a lot of this is deliberate. Let's cut things that are popular, because then people will change their mind about coming up with more money. If nobody wants to pay extra, but then you want to cut something that they really want, then you're kind of putting them in a position where they might have to agree. But if it comes to deciding to clean up the homeless camps, it's going to be expensive, right? Well, where can we get the money? Well, let's cut the funding for the beautiful flowers. And if all the businesses feel like, well, it's the beauty of downtown that attract the tourists, they know their business is on the line if all that stuff goes away.
There's a lot of stuff I would cut before that.
What? What would you do?
Exorbitantly expensive and doing everything.
The one this morning. I think maybe it was Friday, I forget. But it was written by an MD, medical doctor, who is complaining about the way Medicaid and Medicare are funded, and that the funding is being cut, and that the amount that the doctors are getting is going to be less. So she's getting less money, right? And she's complaining about that because she says her bills are going up. She has to pay her bills, right? So it's either the patients of the doctors that are going to have to take up the slack if the government and the state pays less on all of that. But that's another way to cut, is to cut the money that's given to medical care. Although where that's going to hit mostly the elderly, it won't hit me, fortunately, because I'm retired Army, so all of my medical care is on post, and I don't pay, except I pay my Medicare every 3 months, but I don't actually have any other costs, because I just go to Elmendorf and they take care of everything. But, of course, I've got a lot of friends. All my friends are older. How that happened. But all of them are, you have to be on Medicare at a certain age. Not up to you. 65, you're on Medicare, whether you wanted to or not. You can have other health care, like I do, although that was actually a requirement that we be on Medicare to continue with the military. But so, yeah, it's a requirement for everyone to be on Medicare. And once you're on Medicare, Medicare is the primary payer. And there's legal restrictions on how you can be billed for anything after that, like copays and stuff. So the government's trying to force the costs down by using Medicare as what everybody has to pay. But the end result of that was the doctors started limiting how many Medicare patients they would take. So you ended up with a lot of the older people in town not having a doctor because no one would take new Medicare patients, right? Because you'd have to pay, because if you took one Medicare patient, you'd have to be open to all Medicare patients, and then the Medicare system would set the rates you could charge for things. So even if people wanted to continue with their doctor, the doctor couldn't continue with them.
Yeah.
So it's literally an attempt to force prices down. But that's just one other.
Yeah. So the question, what keeps it on Earth, and that was Roger Scruton that we were looking at with the horse.
Yeah. And yeah, he was the one
that
argues that, and it's not, he's using the horse in that particular interview. Yeah.